it's become pretty popular in America now, but when you started doing it, it was a pretty still new thing in America and definitely new in Omaha. Nobody else was doing it. Can you just explain to everybody here what omakase is and what makes it special to you?
Yeah, so the word omakase, it doesn't really have like an English translation that's like a one-for-one translation. We don't really have a word for it. It roughly translates to like entrust or I leave it in your hands. It's just sort of a word that you say where it's like, I don't want to make the decisions. Just bring me what you think is good.
Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Hurrdat Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and the man sitting next to me right now has changed the way that I think about food. It started with just sushi in general, and from the first time I visited Yoshitomo, I knew that was just going to ruin sushi at other places for me because it was just at another level. But the more and more that I have talked with this guy and conversed with him, the more I learn about restaurant life and really just food in general. So I was like, well, I shouldn't just hog all that knowledge to myself. Let's get this guy out in front of the live audience and let more people learn from him. So tonight my guest is the owner of Yoshitomo and Sakura Bana and Koji, Dave Utterback. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so as I was conducting research for this podcast, I found a quote that I was really drawn to. And I think it kind of sums up your ethos as a chef, but you can tell me whether that's right or not. You said, "Don't tell the sushi police, but I'm breaking all the rules." What does breaking the rules look like when it comes to sushi, and how does that sum up your perspective as a chef?
So it just kind of depends on what kind of sushi we're talking about. There goes from the low, the medium, and then kind of my ota counter, my omakase counter. If it's kind of at the top end, a lot of what I'm doing there, everything's kind of set in tradition, right? In Tokyo, this is the way sushi's made. This is how you season this. These are the tools that you use to make the sushi. And everyone is afraid to do anything different because you don't want to, it's always been done this way. You can't use this other equipment to make sushi. Like even yesterday, so to mix the rice, we have like a giant wooden, it's called a hangiri. And it's a giant wooden bucket almost, right? And you put the rice in there and you mix it. And, there's all of these things that you have to do to take care of this like giant wooden bucket. You got to like soak it in water. You can't let it dry. There's no screws or anything. It's all Japanese woodwork. So it actually uses moisture and whatnot to make a watertight seal. And these things that look just like, they cost hundreds of dollars. They're $500-$600 a piece. Somebody will mess it up a couple of times and the whole thing falls apart and you either have to like buy a new one or fix it with like glue or something, right? And so finally I'm like, why do we use this thing, right? It's difficult to maintain. It's got all these properties that are supposed to make the sushi better, but they don't really do it, right? So I'm like, can I just buy like the biggest stainless steel mixing bowl that I can find and like just use a spatula? And like, yes, you can. You can just take a giant stainless steel bowl that's this big and then just use a spatula, and it makes the exact same rice, right? The stainless steel bowl's $33, and the spatula's $5. I'll have them to the end of time. I don't have to worry about a chef like ruining that piece of equipment, right? So like that's like a rule. Like you're not supposed to use anything else, right? Because it ruins the artistry or the fantasy of what this thing is supposed to be. I'll put ingredients on sushi that's like you're not supposed to use, like the pickled ginger. The pickled ginger is not an ingredient. It's like a palate cleanser. But like if you put it with lemon and you put it in a sushi roll, it's like really delicious. But it's like embarrassing to admit, right, that like you're using a condiment, or some like a palate cleanser as an ingredient because you're always taught like that doesn't go on sushi. But like it's just food. You can do whatever you want with it. So yeah, like, those are little rules. Some are big rules. Some are, some of the ones are really, really big rules, but I don't know if I should tell you about them.
Well, I mean, you have a sushi roll at Yoshitomo that you've described to me as like a bacon cheeseburger in a sushi roll. So I think we know some of the rules that you're breaking.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about sushi, and I know this is something you have reverence for, and you know I've used some of the long-standing equipment. You have a great respect for this cuisine. What gives you the confidence to come in and say and to challenge some of those things that are just widely accepted, but you can come in and say, you know what? Why are we doing it this way? Why can't we try this?
It's more because I've done it the hard way. Right? Like you have to learn the basics and the fundamentals before you can decide that something can be taken apart and put together in a different way. I think it's easy, especially now with recipes and techniques and videos. They're easily accessible, right, on the internet. You don't have to spend the time to develop technique anymore. You can just like jump to the end. And so, but when you do that, it's sort of like, I don't know, buying the sneakers and then expecting that you're going to be LeBron James, right? Like you don't get to the dunking photo on Instagram by just buying the equipment. Like you can't read about that, how to dunk and then you can dunk. Like you actually have to go and practice every day. And so, really, I think the reason why I can break those rules and take those chances is because I actually learned how to do it the hard way first.
Mm-hmm. And when we talk about breaking the rules, if somebody comes into one of your restaurants, there's not going to be a California roll. There's not going to be the Philadelphia roll. There's not going to be the soy sauce on the tables. You're not doing that mustardy.
It depends. So, like at each restaurant fits in a different sort of category. Right. So, like at Yoshitomo, the whole idea there is everything comes with a sauce. Everything is essentially a composed dish. It's in sushi form, but you're really not supposed to like do anything for it. You don't need soy sauce. You don't need to like mess it up. We did it, right? And so even at Yoshitomo, if you ask for soy sauce, the servers have a rule will like politely like ask you to just try the food, once or twice, and if you want to ruin it after that, like we'll bring you a bucket of soy sauce. And then at Koji, it's a little bit less loose. It's just like one time. Like if you just ask one time, it's like, oh, you should try it, but here's the soy sauce. And then at Sakura Bana, it's like really entry level, right? There, it's like the soy sauce is on the table. The server will show you how to mix the wasabi toothpaste thing. There, it's like, do whatever you want. Like just eat it, right? So each one has a level for a different sort of experience.
But I want to focus specifically on Yoshitomo because, when people go into a sushi restaurant, they're expecting that soy sauce. They're expecting the mustardy wasabi to mix in or whatever. How have you gone about, especially at Koji and Yoshitomo, trying to break some of those just popular conceptions about sushi that this is what sushi is, this is what has to be provided, and you're just like, well, no, I'm a chef. No offense, everyone, but I know better than you. I can make this food spectacular, so you don't have to dunk it in a bunch of salty juice.
So we went about it two ways. So like, the thing is, at no level of the sushi restaurant do they want you to pour the soy sauce and like ruin the food, right? They're just at each restaurant they just let it happen, but usually there's a chef behind the counter just watching you, like.
Just dying a little bit inside.
Like, look at how much like soy sauce they're pouring on that, right? But at Yoshi, we started out that way. The soy sauce was on the table. We did all of that stuff. I came from a place where I knew what the expectations of the guests were, and I had dreamed of a place where we didn't have to do that. But I was afraid to force people into it, right? It's a new business. I don't want to just immediately start kicking people out the door. And so, for a good year, we let people do that. And then just one day, I'm like, this is not kind of why I opened up a restaurant. Like, I want to take the soy sauce off the table, right? And so it was a really scary day because I was like, we could totally just like ruin this business. Like it's like if I just took the ketchup out of this building, right? And you're just like, no one comes here anymore because there's nothing to dip the French fries in. So like, it's like a really big deal. And like, we took the wasabi out, we took the soy sauce out, and we're like, we're just going to figure it out. But in that, we had to be very strategic about how we took it out. I can't just take the soy sauce out and then go, well, you just eat everything dry now. We had to then develop the menu in a way that like you didn't need it, right? So everything had to come with sauce, its own sauce. And items that were really delicious that needed to be dipped, you know, it was like, I love this thing, but we got to get it. We got to take it off the menu because then I can't. It sends a mixed message if I'm like, all of these you don't need soy sauce, please don't use them. But then here's soy sauce for this just one, and then now you've got it on the table and you're just going to use it, right? So it was I'm so glad it worked out because it could have gone real bad. You know, but it had to be very strategic about that decision.
And I found another quote that you had a couple years ago that I thought was extremely bold. You said that moves like that helped filter out guests who don't get what we do, leaving more room for a more personal experience that guests feel connected to, and that has been the secret to our success. I mean, that's bold to not just go with the public and say, this is what you expect, I know this is what you're looking for, here it is, but to instead say, I'm going to risk you being turned off by this and maybe not coming back because I know that I can provide you a special experience. How tough of a decision was that for you to make?
So it was all kind of in that window where we decided to sort of pivot from like a sushi restaurant that everyone expected and had been to into something different. And to make that pivot, you know, we had learned in that kind of time period that guests were starting to order the more interesting things on the menu and start to, they weren't ordering the California roll. They were really trying some other stuff. And so as we started to pull away from the old way that things were done and kind of take this right turn, I decided like we needed to take not just like a slight right, but we needed to go as far in the other direction as possible because we needed to create, you know, a cuisine that was like so different than maybe what you're used to experiencing in most sushi restaurants that you would either be on board with us and go on this like little journey, or you were going to absolutely hate it and go back to the restaurant that you came from. And that's totally cool. Like I tell the servers, like when we get a negative review because somebody didn't like our food, that's okay. Like you don't have to like all things, right? It's okay to like not like something. And what we do is very specific, and we've built an experience around it. Like we know that restaurant is more experience-based. It's, there's not really very many guardrails on it. And we know that there's no like fluff. Like in other restaurants I worked at, there were items on the menu that everyone in the restaurant knew if you ordered them, you were going to have a terrible meal. Like sometimes you'd see the ticket come up and be like, I can't believe they managed to order like the worst items on the menu. Okay, I guess I'll just make it, right? All those, those items that are mediocre are just gone. Like if they weren't amazing, they don't make the menu. So we know if you commit to our experience that everything that we serve is going to be really good. It's just like a greatest hits menu all the time. And if you don't like it, then you just go back to the restaurant that you like. And that's okay. There's like almost 200 sushi restaurants in this city, and they're all doing the exact same thing. And if you like that, cool. We can be the one restaurant that just doesn't do that. And so in that, if we get, sort of a negative response about our food, that's okay because I only have to fill 45 seats in the restaurant. And once those 45 seats are full, I literally can't make any more money, right? So if there's somebody sitting in the restaurant who wants that old experience, who wants to dip, who wants to, wants miso soup and those things, that's cool. We don't do it. But if we make accommodations for them, right? If we make accommodations to our menu and change the experience just so that we can get your money, we'll get your money and you'll probably come back. But now we got to do it again. Next time you come, you're going to tell friends, they'll do it, and then they're going to come, and then now the restaurant is not the experience anymore. It's your experience. It's like we're not taking you on a journey. You're telling us what we're going to do, and so we're pretty strict about that experience. And so when you come in, if you don't like it, you leave and you don't come back, and you've made room for somebody that is going to get it, right? So like, I don't need to serve everybody in town. It's not a 200-seat restaurant. At those restaurants, you have to do everything in your power to make everybody happy, because you have to fill all 200 seats to pay the bills. Like, I'm paying Benson rent, you know. I only got to fill 45 seats. So like, you know, I can afford at this restaurant to let, you know, a majority of guests go somewhere else and then just focus on the ones that like really get it and are with us for that.
I think that now Yoshitomo has become respected and revered for that attitude of saying, hey, this is, as chefs, this is what we've created. We believe this is the best experience. We are going to create an awesome experience for you. If that's not what you're digging, there are other places for you. I imagine that there was some pushback from guests originally. How long did it take for guests to kind of understand your vision and start to be like, oh, okay, this restaurant's doing something different. This is exciting.
I don't know. Not a lot of that feedback ever really makes it to me. You know, when people just don't come back. You know, it's not like I'm getting like hate mail or things like that. You know, every now and then we'll get like a 1-star review, and it'll be about how this isn't sushi. And those are more fun than anything. Our manager at the end of the year just makes like coffee mugs out of them. So we just have like a collection of 1-star review coffee mugs.
So I got to ask you about Omakase, because this is something that is very much in line with everything we've been talking about. Omakase it's become pretty popular in America now, but when you started doing it, it was a pretty still new thing in America, and definitely new in Omaha. Nobody else was doing it. Can you just explain to everybody here what omakase is and what makes it special to you?
Yeah, so the word omakase, it doesn't really have like an English translation that's like a one-for-one translation. We don't really have a word for it. It roughly translates to like entrust, or I leave it in your hands. It's just sort of a word that you say where it's like, I don't want to make the decisions. Just bring me what you think is good. But more specifically, in Japanese dining, it's kind of a type of restaurant, essentially a tasting menu restaurant. But more often than not, it's specifically sushi or maybe yakitori or maybe tempura, where the chef is just choosing that menu each day specifically for you. You don't get to choose what you're going to eat, and so that style of eating. When I started doing it, I had these sort of private pop-ups. It was like 10, 11 years ago. There was only 5, definitely less than 10 restaurants that did it in the United States. Now there's been a big sushi boom, omakase boom in the world. And, for instance, just in the last 5 years, New York went from, 5, 6 counters to almost 200. In just this specific style of sushi dining, right? So like it's exploded over the years. And so even 10 years ago, there's less than 10 of them. I'm not even doing it as a restaurant. I was like scamming just counter space at like everybody's restaurant on their like close nights. So like Le Bouillon on a Sunday night, at the Oyster Bar, or hook and line with the mezcal tasting on Monday nights, when the restaurant's closed. And it was just invite only back then to get anyone to come to the counter. Like I literally for years would just just like look up food bloggers or people who are like eating, in town, and like just Facebook message people out of the blue and just like, I'm not creepy. I am trying to sell you something, but I do this sushi thing. It looks like you like, fine dining. I think you should try it. Feel free to tell me to go kick bricks. But that's how it all started for the first 4 years, was me inviting you to dinner and then making friends, and then those friends told more friends, and so on and so on. And so finally, when we opened up Yoshitomo that first year, I built this small, tiny little side counter to that to do these dinners. And so at that time, there's still virtually none in the U.S. To put it in context, for 2 years, Omaha had an Omakase counter, and Chicago did not, right? Like, there was the only counter until you hit New York and San Francisco. So, like, we had 1,200 miles of where, like, I was the only sushi guy, right? For 1,200 miles. And so, guests would, like, they would eat, it's hard to put these things into context, right? Like, guests would come in and they would eat the sushi and they would like, this is definitely the best sushi in Omaha. And I'm like, that's it? There's like no one doing this for 1,200 miles. Like, I don't even get Council Bluffs in this. Like, I don't get Plattsmouth or Lincoln or Grand Island. Like, I don't get like the North Pole. Like, all I got was like, it's pretty good for the zip code, But yeah, since then it has exploded. It is really kind of almost jumped the shark. If you think about it, this is something that takes about a decade of training to kind of develop a technique for it. And so in the last 10 years, right, New York had 5 counters, and now they have almost 200. So in 10 years, did, I don't know, 300, 400 sushi chefs just develop training, like within a couple of years? Or is just a bunch of like restaurateurs just opening up expensive rooms, hiring whoever can make a California roll, and then just like overcharging for food, right? So like, it's definitely a thing that's it's skill based, but the experience level of most of the diners that experience it aren't high enough to even know that they're sort of being taken advantage of in a lot of these cities, right? So it's like almost jump the shark. You could be getting, I mean, I've seen some of these counters where they're like serving all you can eat level fish, right? But they're charging $400. And so you just assume that it's like, well, this must be good because it's $400. It's like that art film that like you didn't quite get, but like you didn't want to like tell anybody that you weren't smart enough.
Yeah,
to, like,
you don't want to criticize.
Yeah, you don't want to be like, oh, that was good. That was like really deep, and then but that's all you got out of it. Yeah, that's kind of where the Omakase counter lives today.
Well, it goes back to what you were talking about with the, you can't slip on a pair of Jordans and be an amazing basketball player. You have to put in the time. You have to put in the work. The word that I'm going to use here is probably a bit strong, but I think you'll understand what I'm trying to say. Is that offensive to you as someone who has put in the time and has worked so hard to develop your own style?
Yeah. I mean, in ways, yes. I think anyone consuming better sushi is an overall positive. It's a good thing. People eating better food is good. But the problem is my counter and these other ones popped up, most of these are like really new in the last 2 or 3 years. And we're all getting lumped into the same thing, right? So like the guys at the very, very, very top, they're getting respect because they've always been around, and, they're $600 or whatever. And so, I've been doing this long enough where I've like really been chasing this thing, and then to have somebody who a year ago never even made sushi kind of being viewed as working on the same level is like, it's just sort of like, man, what have I been doing for 19 years, right? Like I'm not going to name names, but there's a counter opening up, or maybe has already opened up in one of the larger cities around us, right? And the chef, he was like a lawyer, and he had kind of like an eat, pray, love moment where he like wanted to just like switch careers and just didn't want to like make money anymore and like wanted to like work in a restaurant. And so he like went to Japan, took a 3-month sushi school class, and then just opened up a counter in this town. And it's the first one in the city, and the city's kind of going nuts for it. And it's like, it's like 3 months is it? That's all the training you need. That's like your doctor, lawyer, all these other things take 10 years before they'll let you practice it. And like, because the experience level in that city is so low for it, this guy with 3 months of training and has never worked in a restaurant before can already just jump all the way up to the top. And it's sort of like really frustrating.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to get us back on the positive track.
Yes.
Because Sarah and I have had the pleasure of going to 2 Omakase dinners at Yoshitomo. One when it was inside the restaurant, one when you've added on ota, which is a kind of a side counter. And I just cannot. These are some of the best meals of my life. I can't tell you guys how cool it is because it is you and the chef and like 4 or 5 other diners at this counter, and it's like 18 courses or between 15 and 20 probably over the course of 3 or 4 hours, and he is making every sushi roll, cutting the fish, rolling the rice, doing everything right in front of you. And you can ask him any question. Like, you can ask him, where are you sourcing this fish? What are the fish markets like?
Like right now.
Yeah, exactly. I specifically remember the last time we went, you told us like a long story about how you couldn't beat your kid in Fortnite. And it was so fresh. Like, you could, any conversation topic is on the table. It's so cool. What, for you, like, when you're talking about an omakase, obviously the food is the most important thing. But how important is that social interaction level too, to just be able to have that access to a chef in a situation you would normally never have?
It's what I love about that style of service. In a really nice restaurant, you go to one of the best restaurants in the world, like you go to the French Laundry in Napa, right? Chef's probably in the kitchen. He's definitely not making the food for you, but he's there, and he'll probably stop by the table and say hi. You may get 2 minutes of his time, and that's it. You made a trek. You spent a couple $1,000. You got 2 minutes of chef's time, and you ate some good food, and that's it. But this, in almost no restaurant, other than these small omakase-style restaurants, do you get just 2.5, 3 hours of just uninterrupted time with the person making your food. It's certainly the least efficient way for anyone to make money in a kitchen. I'm like, I'm going to make you 1 bite of food, and then I'm going to make you another bite of food. And it's just sort of like there are easier ways to $1. But this one is great because it's not only you get the food, but there's an entertainment aspect to it as well. I try to tell these chefs as they're learning to work the counters, like, it's also a show. Like, think of yourself more like a bartender, right? Like, you got to be able to make the drinks and talk with the people. You hear all the secrets. You learn when to keep your mouth shut. You learn to jump in, into someone's conversation. But like learning that aspect of the job is just as important as making the food, like being able to entertain. And oftentimes, when things are going wrong, no matter what, there's always going to be challenges at dinner. Sometimes just things go wrong, and you can't just sort of freeze up and just like, I'm sorry, I screwed up, and we're not eating food anymore. Like, you gotta have like the show, and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to tell some jokes until I get this figured out, and right. So that's what I really love about that style of dinners is you do get the chef's time, and there is a show aspect to it, and it is expensive, but it's also, you don't. That's the only way you're going to get my time anymore. Like, even my family is like, I'm coming in from out of town. Let's hang out. I'm like, you got to buy a ticket. I just don't have time. If you want 2.5 hours of my time, it's like $265 now. Please.
Uh-oh. That's outside my budget. We'll talk off air. But what I really like about omakase is it kind of allows the chef to express their personality through food as well, and kind of show, this is who I am. These are the flavors that interest me. This is what I create. And what's really interesting about you is so many sushi chefs grow up and they train under one person. And they're kind of like an apprentice almost. And they kind of learn everything under that person. And then they almost like carry that legacy on.
Right.
That wasn't your path. You didn't just train under one person. You've learned in many different ways and learned from many different people. So you almost have like your own Dave Utterback style.
Yeah. So
how unique is that?
Extremely unique. So for aside from these new counters opening up here in the U.S. with like no training, in Japan, typically the path to get to your own counter is you apprentice for somebody, and it takes about 10 years for you to like develop those skills to where you can kind of leave the nest and go do your own thing. But in Japan, those 10 years, how do I put it? You go and you work for somebody, and they're at the very top of the game. Just think of them like Michelangelo, right? Not the Ninja Turtle, the painter.
The Ninja Turtle's pretty great too. You can learn some good
Either
stuff
way, they both work actually in this story. But you train for 10 years, and when you finish, you've learned to make beautiful food. You've learned to make that chef's food, and only that chef's food. You show up, they're going to teach you how to cure the mackerel. Well, they're going to show you their way. Their way is 4 or 5 generations of sushi chefs making mistakes, and then they're like, they got it. So when you show up, this is how you cure the mackerel. This is the way it's done. Why? Because this is how we have figured this one out. And so when you get finished, you can make wonderful food, but I almost feel like you're stuck. You're stuck. You can only do that food, right? And I see it when I do nothing but eat at these guys' counters, apprentices and top guys in Tokyo, and every counter is almost the same. They differ by what kind of school you kind of come from, what your lineage is, but you can see the common thread through those, and nobody makes any changes to their meals or their philosophy. It's not really in your best interest to do so. If you learn how to paint like a master, why would you just go do comic books, right? It's for your career in your best interest to continue to make this perfect food that you've learned to make. So when you get out of this system, you've not really learned how to cook. You've learned how to just recreate someone else's meal. So, I'm weird and different in that when I decided that this was what I wanted to do, there were only five or six counters in the U.S. and there was no one to train me. And so I just decided to teach myself. And so, over the past 11, 12, 13 years, it's been me without sort of somebody to show me. Somebody to go, here's how you make it, this is the best way to do it. I have to read books, I have to watch other people's techniques, I have to go to someone else's counter, eat their food, and try to reverse engineer their technique. And so it's really frustrating because it takes a really long time for me to figure out how to do something, like how to prepare a dish. But once I've figured it out, I know how to take it apart, put it back together. I know why it works, why it doesn't work. But also, strangely, it doesn't fit into a regional style. So sushi is a regional food, and it changes as you go from north to south. The construction, the ingredients, the techniques, they all change, right? And so when I learn something or figure it out, it's not necessarily set in any one region style. It's just how I figured it out. And so my sushi is a mishmash of all these different regional styles and techniques that, because there was no one ever to tell me no, I could do whatever I wanted. But because there was no one ever to show me, I've just created this weird thing. Think of it like barbecue, like regional barbecue, very, very distinct to each area and how you're supposed to do things. Nobody would just learn Texas barbecue and then Carolina barbecue and then, KC, St. Louis, and then try to make a mishmash version of all of it. Because everybody in each region would be like, that's not how you're supposed to do it. You can't both rub this Texas style, but then put coleslaw on it and vinegar like North Carolina, right? You can't do these things. But because of where we're at in Omaha, there's no sushi police. That's me. So I'm the only one who knows that my sushi is completely confused, right?
But you've taken this counter to cities all over the U.S. You've taken it to Japan. What has been the response there when the sushi police are there? I mean, are other sushi chefs, are they curious? Are they a little bit defensive? Are they like, man, I wish I had this freedom? What's their response been?
It's mixed. I mean, not mixed in like I hear bad stuff, but generally when I travel in the past, I did less pop-ups or events at sushi restaurants. I just thought it would be weird, to go to another sushi restaurant and then make better sushi than the restaurant that you pop up at. It just seems like kind of a jerk thing to do.
It's very kind of you,
right?
Not to do that, yeah.
So like I'll just pop up, and I've made sushi everywhere. Like when I say I was hustling back then, it was like I'm washing rice in a bathroom sink of a wine bar in Davenport, Iowa. I'm making sushi at a tiki bar in Chicago. Like I've kind of done it everywhere. And back in those days, the goal of the travel was to actually expose guests in cities that didn't have it yet, right? So like I only went to Chicago to do Omakase because Chicago didn't even have it. I would go to Kansas City and Denver and all of these other towns and do this because there was just no access to it. And so I would just come to you. And so, now I'm doing more collaborations with chefs, more because like now I guess I have enough of a reputation with that they'll just accept me and let me into their kitchens. And now those are opportunities for me to learn even more because I can say, how do you do this? I've always wanted to know, right? Because I don't have experience in those kitchens. So like, I don't know how they've solved the problems that I have. And I can go back and go, you do that? And I'm learning that like, it's all smoke and mirrors, right? So like, I go into these Michelin sushi kitchens and I'm like, that's how you do that? This is crazy, right? So the travel it helps me train. The reception has been really good in the places that I've gone to. So like, I was really nervous last year to take it to Tokyo. I have a friend who has a restaurant in Ginza. Ginza is like the mecca for sushi. Ginza is like Fifth Avenue. Everything's very expensive. The nicest restaurants are there. The most famous sushi chefs, like, you have that zip code, you immediately get clout and respect, and you can only have a counter there if you're like a big dog. And so for me to be able to make sushi at sort of like the very top at a very highly respected restaurant at the very pinnacle of where this stuff's being made was really scary, because mostly I'm serving clientele that has a lower experience level, and like I can kind of do whatever I want. I know it's better than anything that you had, but over there I don't know where I land. And that trip that first trip I was really nervous, right? Because I've got this weird style, and over there everyone's eating at these top chefs counters and they're experiencing the very top, so they know if I'm not like legit
up to par.
And Japanese counters are also very different than US counters. US counters are like really loud and everyone talks to each other because like we can't deal with like awkward silence, so everyone's like, hey, what's your name? What do you do? I do this, and everyone talks the whole time. But in Japan, it's very quiet. And so I'm also used to Western counters where when I hand you a bite of food, everyone just goes, oh yeah, that tastes so good. But in Japan, nobody makes any noise if something's good. You just hear like, good. That's it. So I'm like, I don't know how this is gonna like fly. And so, I get there, I make my weird sushi, and immediately the first bite, the whole counter is like, oh, that's so good. And I'm like, I did it, right? And so the feedback that I got back from the Tokyo guest was, like if you opened up a counter in Ginza right now, you would do very well. And so I was like, I did it. Like I faked it and I made it. You know, like I managed to teach myself, you know, take myself from, you know, the very bottom, right? And train myself to a point where I can run a counter at the very top with the very top dog. And like, as far as I know, like I follow kind of the sushi world very closely. Like I just all over the world. Like I'm like a super fan. As far as I know, I think that I'm the first Western like based sushi chef to like host their own counter in Japan, right? Like nobody would just invite some random sushi chef like to Tokyo to just like make sushi. Like why would you do that? That's silly. So like to also sort of maybe be the first to ever do that is just like crazy to have like no training, you know, whatsoever, and to kind of take yourself and like push yourself and like do it there. And now I'll be back in 3 weeks to do it again. And I'm like, now I'm not really like nervous. I'm more like, oh, this is a pretty good excuse to go on vacation. I just have to work one day and then I get my vacation in Tokyo. But yeah, it was like really worried about the feedback, very worried.
Okay, I want to take you back to when you first started doing omakase here in Omaha. You were working at another sushi restaurant, and you set up just a little 4-person table. And your first one, I believe the only 2 people who came were your tattoo artist and his wife or girlfriend at the time.
Yeah.
At that time, there were 10 omakase counters in America. What made you think this would work?
Well, I already had a job, so I didn't need to worry about that as like income. And it was my sort of 10-year anniversary as being a sushi chef, and I thought that it would be fun. There was an Omakase documentary called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It's really, it kind of set the bar for kind of food and how we tell stories in food now. But I had been to the counter, the famous counter from the movie, and it was my 10-year anniversary as a sushi chef. And I thought, with virtually absolutely no training, yeah, I can do that too. I'll make all 20 bites that I had at the restaurant. They'll loop up and coincide directly with the movie. And I've been talking about how much, you know, how I would do it if it was me, right? Like when you're a cook, you talk about, if I had my own restaurant, I'd do it like this, or I would never do that. And so it was finally the time to like put up and do it. And so we advertised it. It was in the paper, a couple of other things. I was going to do 3 nights, 3 services. It was like a 6 o'clock, 7, and a 9 or something like that. And so it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so I just stood there waiting for the people to come, and just nobody came for like until Sunday at 9 o'clock. 2 people came. And so I made them the sushi, and it was fun. But then I'm like, oh, nobody really cares about this kind of stuff. But at the same time, you know, when you put these things in context, it's like 11, 12 years ago. This is kind of before Instagram. This is really before Yelp. The influencer is still 7 or 8 years from being born. You know, getting the word out about these food experiences were really difficult back then. And so like but it grew from those 2 people. And so I decided to have them quarterly, and then, you know, it kind of spun out from that. But yeah, the food was bad. Like it wasn't good. Like I think about those early tables and counters and the food that I had access to ordering. I had no idea about quality. I didn't. And I had no idea about the rice quality or what made that kind of sushi special. And so I was essentially making just a more expensive version of the restaurant's food for guests. And so like I think back to those dinners, and I'm like really, really embarrassed. Like there are those thoughts that you think about at like 2 a.m. when you've woken up to go to the bathroom, and you're like, I can't believe they ate that food and loved it, but that's growth, right?
I mean, nobody's good at something when they start doing it. Yeah, you are bad at something, and then you do it again and again and again, and hope that you get better over time. You mentioned gyro. I mean, we got to go back. I got to have you tell the story to the people here of your first trip to Japan and kind of what really opened your eyes to what sushi could be.
Yeah, so I was just working in a sushi restaurant. I was the fastest California roll maker at the restaurant. I could make like 75 California rolls in an hour. I was very good. I thought that I was like the best, right? But it was just like a regular restaurant. After about 2.5 years, I decided, this must have been 2008, 2009. I decided to take my first like solo trip to Japan. Like I said, at this time, there's no Instagram, there's no like lists. So finding out the cool restaurants is very difficult. And so I just Googled, like a real pro does, best sushi in Tokyo. And I took a picture with my digital camera of the computer screen. And then I showed that to my concierge, and they made me a reservation at a restaurant called Sukiyabashi Jiro from this documentary. And I didn't really know much about the restaurant. The documentary had not come out. They were a well-known restaurant, but at that time, nobody was really going. The sushi boom had not started until that movie, until that documentary. And so I showed up. I was the only guest of the day. Now, they're one of the hardest reservations in the world to book, to the point where there's actually a sign in front of the door in Japanese that says, "Please stop taking pictures of our door. Like, we're not open, you can't get in." But it's in Japanese, so everyone does it because they just like don't know what it says. And so everyone's got pictures literally in front of a sign that says like, "Please don't take pictures of our door." But nevertheless, I was the only guest of the day. The owner, Jiro-san, is a 3 Michelin star chef, the oldest living practitioner of our craft. He's maybe 94 now. His son mostly runs the counter. Even his son's like approaching 70. But no one was going. I got in. The meal's famously 25 minutes long. So at 12, 13 years ago, it's $300 for 20 minutes of sushi. But they're making it at the very highest levels. I had never experienced food like that before. I just came from a regular restaurant. And regular restaurants, nobody's a lifer, nobody's a professional. Like, it's just another stop on the journey. No one's like expecting to spend their you don't get a job at the Olive Garden. You're like, this is it. Like, I'm here. I made it. You just need money until you go back to school or hit the lotto or something. And so it's just like another stop. And that's where I was working. This was the first time that I had encountered like professionals. Everyone that I worked with was like watching the clock, playing pranks on each other, scamming beers in the walk-in. It was just a regular restaurant. But these guys were professionals. They were lifers. They had been doing it longer than I'd been alive by 3 or 4 times. And it was the first time that I had ever encountered like food like that. I didn't know that regular people could just eat like that kind of food. Like, I thought that you had to be like a Bond villain, like you had to be like fabulously wealthy and like own a yacht to like eat that kind of food. And so it just like blew my mind that this was happening to me. And I knew it was important. Like, I knew as it was happening that like something very important was happening to me. But in my really terrible Japanese, I told them that I too was a sushi chef. And these 3 Michelin star sushi chefs who had been doing it for collectively 150 years looked at each other and they like laughed. And it wasn't like a small laugh, like everyone just laughed. It was like an extended laugh for like a long time. And I just like, I knew immediately that I shouldn't have said that. I should have just like went home. And I just like died of embarrassment at that counter. But when I left, the restaurant is kind of at the exit of a subway station. It's halfway up the stairs. A lot of these counters, they're in weird places. They'll be in parking garages and weird office, just random unmarked doors. This one's just in a subway stairwell, and it's just an unmarked door, and you go in. But I stood outside on the street, and I just sat against this subway exit as like the Tokyo subway traffic is just like stepping over me, and I'm like furiously writing into a notebook, like all of these things that are happening are like slipping out of my mind, and I knew that I had to like write it down. I had to document them, and that was where I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. I'm going to come back to Omaha, and I'm going to learn to make this kind of sushi. The very worst place in America that you could like learn these skills. Literally the furthest away from the only professionals in the country. I'm going to try to teach myself how to do this. But yeah, that's the Jiro experience.
When you look back at that now, I mean, can you even put yourself in the shoes of yourself, sitting by that subway station and thinking, I'm going to do, like, the journey that you've been on is so incredible. What are the emotions that like you experience when you think about that?
It's weird because like it's kind of locked in my brain. Like it's like a photo. Like I actually think about it not in first person. I actually like view myself when I think about it, like watching myself like do it, right? And to think that now like I use a better tuna vendor than they do. I have better rice than they do. I have similar ingredients. To even think that I have access to any of these things is like just wild. It's just wild to think.
So I want to touch on real quick. I mean, again, looking at that journey, you're a James Beard nominated chef right now. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, the Beard Awards are like the Grammys, the MVP, whatever you want to say, of the Emmys of the food world. I mean, this is a very respected designation, and you were nominated a couple times. You became a finalist for Best Chef Midwest last year, and then were a semifinalist for Most Outstanding Restaurant this year. I mean, those are some serious bona fides that I'm just using Omaha as a comparison, and because this is what a lot of people in this room know. But I mean, even the Midwest hasn't seen recognition like that. You're becoming nationally, even internationally known.
Right.
What was it like to receive that recognition on that level and finally be like, okay, people are starting to get this?
So it's just been wild, right? So 19 years ago when I started, nobody was getting into the business to become famous. You just got a job, right? Nobody was getting into the business to be on TV. The Food Network was really just getting started. Nobody had any designs of being a superstar. You just cooked. There was no, how do you become a celebrity chef, right? Like, there's just Bobby Flay and Yan King Cook. Those are like the guys, and that's it. There's Emerald. So, you don't go from washing the dishes to Emerald. Like, no one has that any expectation. It's different now. Now you get into the business. Before you've even cooked anything, you have an Instagram account, right? And you've already got a TikTok, and you've already made your own dance. But so like most of my career was spent up until 3 years ago, and nobody was paying attention to anything. I was just like cooking like I would just normally cook, because I wasn't like chasing anything down, right? I was just like making food and trying to improve my skills, like my personal skills. And so, when the first semi-nomination happened, it was just like completely blown away. Like that thing isn't even on the radar, right? Like I make sushi rolls. Like it's just like not being nominated, for being good at French fries, right? Like it's just like a regular food. So like just it wasn't fine dining. The restaurant was, like, I just viewed it as like a regular restaurant. And so to even have that thing happen it was something that you never thought would happen at all. But there was also no expectation of going any further than that. So the way that the beards sort of work was, until recently, the odds were always stacked against us. The way the judging happens, it's secretive, but it was very much kind of an old boys club. When if you became a nominee or you became a winner, you became a judge. And so each city that had a winner had one more judge than everybody else. And bigger cities, by density, have more judges than anybody else. And so, if you're in Minneapolis and you've done well for the past 20 years, why would you just like throw a vote to Omaha? So it was always in these three cities: Minneapolis, St. Louis, Kansas City. Until they changed the way that that judging happened, there was never a world where anyone outside of those cities had any chance. But we always got like a semi. Every year we would get a semi. Des Moines would get a semi. There's always an acknowledgement of restaurants that are doing well that I think they want to continue. It's sort of like you're doing awesome, keep it up, right? To kind of keep momentum in those cities going.
An attaboy.
Yeah, but I don't think that there was ever any expectation out of these cities that anyone would ever break from that, right? It was sort of like, we need to field a team to play basketball, so we, come play, but there's no expectation that you're actually going to, be on the team. And so the rules changed. They got rid of a lot of that voting system. They got new judges, and they got new rules for voting. And so in that first year, like, I broke into the finalists, and it was the first time in the 35-year history of that award that there was ever even a nominee outside of Minneapolis, St. Louis, or Kansas City, and once Madison, right? So like now it seems like achievable in some way, but up until recently, it was like just a pipe dream. Like that could never happen to us. We could never win. And now it feels like, like Tim was up this year. It feels like it's going to happen to somebody. Like some young chef like Kane or somebody is going to like finally get it, right? And then and that'll be the tipping point for us. It's what happened in Kansas City. When Blue Stem won, that was the tipping point for the city. Now the city knew that they could get it. Chefs started chasing it down. The restaurants got better, and we're on that same trajectory. I think, I'll be so excited when somebody gets it. It's going to be one of these young kids, but we're on a trajectory for it.
It's fascinating to see your excitement, because your excitement isn't, okay, we're starting to break through. I think I could finally get that, or Yoshitomo could get that. But you're looking at Tim Nicholson. You're looking at Kane Atkinson. You're looking at other chefs. What is it about this community that makes you root for each other, or make you say, collectively, even if it's not me who's getting this recognition, just for Omaha to get this is huge? I mean,
they're just much better chefs than I am. So like I look at these things from like a skill, they're better restaurants. The Boiler Room's just a kick-ass restaurant. Like, it's just whenever I go in, I'm like, I wish my restaurant was like this good, right? Like, but it's one of those things, you work in a space, you see all the warts and how it's not right. But, I view all of those guys as just like, I look up to them. Like, I love eating their food. I was at, Aucron last night for the España dinner, and I was like, I grabbed Carlos, and Ben was working in the kitchen, and I grabbed Chovy, and I was like, this food is so good, right? Like, Aucron's one of those restaurants, like, if you pick it up and you drop it in another city, it's one of the best restaurants in Chicago. And so I'm excited, because it makes my dining experiences better too. Like, there's no expectation that like I'm going to win, because there's never been an expectation like these things just happen to me, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, thanks, I guess, But it always seems like that's supposed to be for somebody else. Like, it feels like it's for someone else. And I think the community, the chef community over the last 10 years has really changed. Like, when I started in these kitchens, it was really cutthroat in a way that, like, we all knew each other, but anytime anyone got any sort of publicity or press or their moment in the sun, it was like, that guy's a hack. Why would the newspaper even talk about that guy? He sucks. I know all his dirty secrets. But somewhere around 10 years ago, most of us ended up working in a kitchen together with each other. And we really started to really become a community that sort of just backed each other up. And it started to get excited about each other and promoted each other rather than sort of being like, there's only one restaurant in town that you should go to, and it's mine. And you should not go to any other restaurant ever except mine, right? It's like, once that changed we became more of a positive community, kitchen community, that's when everything changed in the city. Our restaurants got better. I think we can all agree the last 10 years have been pretty good for our restaurant scene. Like, that's when that all changed. Like, as soon as we started supporting each other, I mean, all the ships rose at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely been fun to see, and I think, you've been at the forefront of that. Ultimately, whoever ends up getting that first beard, because it is coming, you helped break that barrier by being the first finalist, and it was well-deserved. Dave, I have so many more questions here. I have so many more questions based off of what you have, but, I mean, you told me I'm going to be paying you $250 or whatever for this time now, so... But in all reality, I do respect your time, and so I'm going to cut it off there. Thank you so much for giving us a chance to talk about sushi, get a look into your life, and really just kind of learn a little bit more tonight. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.